Hello and welcome to Art Studio 8, I believe. Gosh, can't believe I've done 8 live streams already. It's absolutely insane. Nobody's with me yet, so I'm going to give it a few minutes. We're going to switch up some things today, and I'll talk about what we're going to do. Oh, we got one person with us. Thank you very much. Again, if you have any questions, we got 2 people with us. Excellent. 2 viewers. Whew, loud outside. Sorry about that. I have my windows open. So we're going to go over a few things today. I've switched up a little bit in my studio since the last time I live streamed, I realized. So I'm going to kind of walk you through what this setup kind of looks like right now. Talk a little bit again about abstract art, where I'm at with making abstract art currently. Some reference images, and then we'll talk about a little bit of past work and how I'm doing some things, and we're going to talk about how materials get really messy and mixed together really soon. So, first off, well, you know what? No one's even watching right now, so I'm going to give it a few minutes. Got some people who left. Oh, my mother's watching. Hi, Mom. You're the only person watching currently. Okay, so we got some changes in my studio. As you can see, thanks to Ligori Academy, we have this lovely drawing table, which I've been starting to do Zoom classes, video chat classes with my students, doing some drawing lessons. Excellent. We're doing some figure drawing stuff on Friday of last week, getting some proportions down, how to map out the muscular structure. As you can see, I no longer have this the big folding table over here. It is gone. Instead, I put my bookcase over here, and I switched up my cart. It's a little bit makeshift. It's a little rickety here and there, but it gets the job done. And most importantly, I have the easel set up right above my palette, so you can see when I'm mixing my palette much easier. We will return to this painting. Don't worry. We will get back to there. It is finally fully dry. It took a while because I had a lot of stuff going on. But we will finish this painting probably next week. But today I wanted to do something different. Talk to you all a little bit about some abstract art making materials, continuing what we talked about last week. So, update on what we did last week. Remember, we mixed wood finish with some marble dust and plaster, and then maybe what else did we mixed maybe a polyacrylic finish into it a little bit. We made a nice thick goo essentially, and so I coated that piece of wood panel, and it was drying in my studio, and I actually took it out into my backyard to dry, and in the sun and with birds landing on it and everything, it actually fell off where it was drying and cracked into a bunch of pieces, unfortunately. But it's still a pretty interesting surface to work with, and it now kind of looks a little bit like pieces of tree bark. It's pretty interesting. So, it breaks apart. It's pretty fragile. So what we're going to do today is actually just going to dump all this to the side. We'll come back to that. But what we're going to do is we're going to use this nice textured surface now that we have. You can see because of the sun and the material, it actually warped a little bit, my panel, but that's okay because this is pretty much just a study piece for all of you lovely people. So I'm actually going to use this surface, and we're going to do something different today, but I want to talk about why we're doing what we're doing. So I'm going to come over here. So back in I think it was 2016. I had a residency at University of Pennsylvania with a bunch of scientists and a team of artists, and we were learning all about network science and the difference and how network science can be applied to all different kinds of fields. And so what I wanted to focus on was the difference in contrasting between man-made networks, or more rigid geometric structures in their networks, and organic or natural made networks. And so I figured out how to do that by taking wood finish, coating a panel in entirely thick wood finish, and then kind of drip painting, kind of like Jackson Pollock style, into it with oil enamel, and they naturally repel each other. So that's what we're going to do today. But I wanted to show you a few images of what that actually looks like. So this is a painting. I wonder if you can see that well. Yeah. Painting called Default Mode. Let's take off my hat so I can actually peek over and see what I'm pointing at here. So you can see in the background, all this dark glossy black is the wood finish, and then the white oil enamel that's on top of it repels and naturally spreads apart. So that's my natural organic network, which I was focusing on. And then contrasting that with this box here that has this network that is actually a 1-point perspective, and how you would correctly draw, say, a chessboard in space, but missing a few things. But it's perspectival, man-made, linear, mathematical perspective in contrast to the organic networks and naturally how those two different materials break apart, spread apart, interact with each other. And we'll talk about the reason why they do those things. So now the reason I'm going to kind of continue here, actually, I can show you a few more examples. So I also did a series of paintings on the planets. I hope that's not too blown out. But I used, again, these materials to create some of this naturally occurring networks in their textures. You can see it happening a little bit with, same thing happens with when you put oil paint into wood finish that's that thick. Now, the reason it happens is because they have different chemicals in them. Specifically, wood finish has, to make it harden and dry and really sink into the surface of wood pores, it actually contains certain epoxies and resins in it. Here's another one I did of the sun. And so you can see them. This is a little bit more aggressive and movement oriented, right? But these splatters are all oil enamel mixed into this black wood finish background. Now, they have different drying agents, those different chemicals within them. So that's why they splatter and look the way they do. So what we're going to do actually today is coat what was our panel. We're going to coat that in wood finish. And while that's still wet, we're going to drip some oil enamel into it. But first, I need to move my easel here to the ground. This is part of the reason I switched up my setup, so I can easily show you guys this situation. So I'm going to set you all over here. Move some stuff around. That's on the ground. And as you notice, again, I have my drop cloth, plastic drop cloth, because we're using some serious materials. And I'm actually going to go ahead. I know you heard earlier with that car driving by, we're going to open our windows because some of these oil-based materials that we're using, you need some good airflow. So let's turn on the fan, get some good airflow going, and then let's set you up down here. Let's see if you can see what oh yeah, this is gonna be good. Okay, so for right now, we have my panel here. It's got this weird kind of tree bark texture, which is nice, but we're gonna cover that all up. So I'm gonna grab some things I need to use. This is a random bucket full of, well, it used to be full of wood finish, Minwax dark walnut wood finish, but now it's got all kinds of sticks and stuff to spread the materials around. And let me grab this handy dandy milk crate full of all kinds of cool materials and things. Okay, so we're gonna pop open this can of wood finish. Very good, very good. And I'm going to take my stick, and again, we're going to mix it up. So because my wood finish and my oil-based materials, they're all have different combinations of chemicals and things like that, resins, epoxy, pigments, binders. drying agents. They're full of all kinds of weird things, right? And so to make sure that they actually stay together all in one liquid, essentially, one material in a can, you need to mix your paint. You need to mix it all together. Make sure it's nice and good. Okay, so put that back in my bucket. Now I'm just gonna take a totally messed up brush. This is, by the way, this is the brush we used last time. You can see it's still coated in all sorts of gunk and everything. It's coming apart. Yeah, it's really gross. I need a rag. Give me 1 second. Rag. It's always important to have a bunch of rags. You can use old t-shirts. You can buy cloth rags at Home Depot if you really want, but it's really important you get out a bunch of rags to clean off your hands and things. Here we go. We're going to take this disgusting old brush that I've used many a time with wood finish, and essentially we are just going to coat this entire panel in wood finish. Now, let me angle this down so you can see what I'm doing here. You know, I need a different brush than this. This is really, really dry. Do I have a better brush in here? I do not. So, let me find... Oh, this one might be perfect, actually. Yeah, it is perfect. It's a little stiff. Use this. And it's a smaller brush, so it's going to take a little bit more time, but that's okay. So as you can see, putting on the wood finish straight onto this wood panel, if I'm laying it on really thick, traditionally with wood finish, you would lay it on, not anywhere near this thick, you'd brush it on, and then you'd wipe it off with a rag to really make sure that it would sink into the pores of the wood. But we wanted that really dark wood finish pigment with its resin and epoxy to mix in and sit on the surface much thicker. So it's going to form this kind of like thinner bubble where all that pigment's going to sit between the surface tension on the top and the panel underneath. And as you can see, it's starting to mix in and soak into the wood in some places. Remember, this panel is really dry right now because, well, one, it's set out in the sun where our material we made last time dried, but two, also we mix in all that plaster and marble dust into it, and those are really dry, powdery substances, like kind of chalky, and so they're going to soak up all that moisture, all that. So we're almost there, almost have that whole surface coated in this dark pigment. And again, I'm like really laying it on here. I want it to be nice and dark, bubble up in certain areas, maybe get that nice glossy dark black. Now, as you can see, there's a bunch of bubbles in the surface over here. That's okay because it's going to dry and congeal together, and it's going to push out all the air from it. It's called self-leveling liquids and things like that. So, oh yeah, see, you can get some really nice, I wonder if you can see that. Hold on, let me get you closer here. So you can see the nice texture of the substance and that tree bark texture underneath coming up through that thinner, dark black wood finish. It's really nice. So now, set up here. Okay, so now we have my panel coated in wood finish. This is going to be dry for a while. Wet for a while. It's not going to dry for a long time. And so what we're going to do, while it's drying very, very slowly, we're going to take some protective Rust-Oleum oil enamel. Now, we're going to pop this open. I need something in order to do that. So I'm going to grab a knife of sorts to pop this open. Where might be right back here. pop this can of paint open. And again, just like all my paint that comes in cans like this, we need to make sure that it's nice and mixed up because as you can see, the binder separates from the pigment. And so you get these weird discolorations. And so all you need to do is just mix it up with a mixing stick. Okay. Come over here. And this is actually going to be our tool that we're going to use to apply it to our panel as well, is this, Home Depot paint mixer stick. So I grab my paint here and I'm going to mix it up. What's nice about this paint, this oil enamel, is that it's meant to last. And because of that, it's actually a bit thicker and a little bit more heavy duty, durable than, say, some of our other, industry house paints or industrial paints. So I'm going to mix this together. It's pretty good. It didn't need to be mixed too much. And all right. So as you can see, it has this really goopy, it's very viscous, but that's really nice because look, you can see as it comes off the point of my mixing stick, it has a pretty steady stream of paint for a while and a very thin coating layering. And what that's going to allow us to do is really kind of draw and drip just like Jackson Pollock. Now, there's a whole history of painting on the floor and about, there's a lot of what Jackson Pollock's work is about is moving the painting from the wall where it's vertical, where you stand on your 2 legs and 2 feet, and putting that painting and laying it on the floor. That way you have to be on all fours and reaching over it in this more like animalistic, non-human way, and using the gravity of the earth and the painting laying on the outside of the slow curve that is the curvature of the earth and the orb of the earth, the sphere of the earth and the planet, and using that gravity to allow your materials and to be essentially free yourself of human aspects and become more animalistic. And so that's why a lot of this painting, a lot of drip painting, a lot of people think it looks very childish because it lacks a certain sense of control. But that's actually exactly what the painting is trying to do. So let's angle you down here. So we're going to take my oil enamel right here, and we're going to start to drip onto the surface here. And you're going to see exactly. I'm not going to do anything too specific. This is, again, just a study to show you. But look, you can see just how much I dipped it into the paint, just how much can actually come onto the surface here. Off of my mixing stick, and how thin that can actually kind of draw with it, and it's almost like scribbling with paint. But you can see already, look at this beautiful texture, and some of the pigment is starting to come out. You can see it's starting to what's called fractal in certain areas. I hope you can see this. I can't really. Yeah, you can. So it's starting to fractal because of those drying agents, and those different chemicals are starting to repel each other. And what's nice is it's actually creating these really interesting breaks where our bark was, where that oil enamel is starting to flow over. But the more and more it's letting itself dry, look, you can see it's starting to continue to fractal out, and it creates this really interesting sense of depth. And this is really this organic, chemical-based, naturally occurring networks that I'm talking about. And so we can continue adding some more material. And again, this is just white oil enamel paint on this darker, almost, it's a really dark brown, but it looks almost like a glossy black wood finish. So if you can use different color oil enamels, like for instance in the sun painting I did earlier, I used yellows and oranges and reds to create these interesting textures. And so this really allows us more control than you would think in drip painting because of the oil enamel and the chemicals that are used in making it. Really, it's kind of like rubbery, and you get this kind of like stringiness, and you can really almost scribble and draw with it, create certain movements. I can do some circular patterns. And so I'm starting to get a lot of oil enamel on here. And so what I'm going to do now we have that whole surface that was coated in wood finish, and I've added oil enamel to it. It's starting to fractal, it's starting to break apart, it's starting to shift on that surface tension. Remember I talked about that really thin bubble that is the paint that's on the surface of my panel. There's surface tension, and all of that fractaling is happening on that surface tension, and it's trying to spread and break within that bubble that's on the surface. And so I'm actually going to go back in with wood finish now and do the same thing, some drip techniques, try to balance out that sense of contrast between this really dark glossy black and the more satin white oil enamel, and try to really level out those that contrast here. So again, I've got my dipstick or my mixing stick. I've got my wood finish here, and going to actually let that kind of splatter. So the wood finish is much, much thinner than the oil enamel, and thus it's a little bit harder to control. But I'm going to start to just let this fall onto the surface here a little bit, and we can see it's starting to mix in. And what I wanted to do is start to break apart the bigger areas of this white oil enamel to balance out the contrast. That's my goal. I'm treating this whole painting, this whole surface, as kind of one area in and of itself. You know, in landscape painting, you have your foreground, background, and middle ground. With abstract painting, it's more about the individual layers and treating this entire surface as one kind of wave or wash or glaze of different materials and interactivity. So almost there. I'm gonna add a little bit more material here. I want some things to happen, you know. And so we've balanced out that contrast, and you can see it's still continuing to shift very slowly and break apart. That's those chemical reactions, again, those breaking apart and fractaling, those natural organic networks. So now, say I'm trying to control what I really can't control, essentially, right? So it's a conversation between me, my aesthetics preferences, my visual preferences for this surface of this painting, with the material, right? It's a conversation between me and the material. So say I don't like how it looks in one area. What you can do, just like how we use paint thinner to wipe away or clean off oil paint from our brushes, we can actually use some of our same mixing mediums, such as linseed oil or paint thinner or turpentine, mineral spirits. We can use those things to take away and actually clear areas of my painting. So let me set you back up here again, my easel. And we're gonna, there we go. So I have my mineral spirits and I have my linseed oil. I'm first going to just clean off my brush here just a little bit, load up with mineral spirits, and again I'm going to drip paint, but with the mineral spirits. I'm going to drip into certain areas where I think probably too much is going on visually for me, and it's going to repel some of that paint back and break it down even further and start to actually mix some of the colors together again a little bit. But you can start to what this does even further is thins out the wood finish even further. And you can start to see some of those colors are starting to blend in a little bit softer. Hopefully you can see that from the camera. Here, yeah, that was good. Let me grab the camera here again. So you can see in some of these specific areas here, right? Like right here, or even right up here. That's a good one, right? You can see that mineral spirits is actually starting to clear away and mix together those paints. Those paints are no longer repelling each other nearly as much. They are now mixing together, creating more subtle coloration. So let's try and add some linseed oil into this as well. I'm not quite exactly sure how the painting is going to take to the linseed oil, but we're gonna find out, because that's what's so fun about painting. Honestly, sometimes, especially in abstract painting, you don't never know what's gonna happen. So we're gonna drip some linseed oil into these areas. And this is part of the reason I just absolutely love oil-based mediums, as messy and as unsafe as they can be. As long as you know how to use them and you're safe and in the right environment, you can have some really interesting experiments and fun playing with how those materials interact with each other. So it doesn't look like my linseed oil is doing a whole lot here, but it is kind of solidifying some areas a little bit more, making the paint kind of congeal a little bit more together. And so what I think is one of the more desirable aspects of abstract painting is you never quite know exactly how it's going to turn out in the very end, especially when you're using materials like this. So for instance, you can't even see the painting. This painting that we just did, right? Because these materials dry so slowly, and because of the environment that we're in right now, it's going to take a long time for it to dry, and it's going to change. It's going to gradually change over time. And so you're going to get some pretty unique experimental kinds of textures and interesting things happening. And so that is what I had for our lesson today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Nice, short, sweet, simple. And we'll check back in on this abstract painting next week, and hopefully also continue working on our landscape that we started. Again, be safe, be healthy. Hope you're all happy. Happy Tuesday. It's gorgeous outside. Go for a walk, stretch your legs. Take care, and I will see you next week. Thanks. Bye.